couple of news stories each, just around general purpose technology, not specifically retail, and then we'll get into the application of general purpose technology in retail and what that means. What have I spotted this week? So I thought it was really interesting, and this is actually 2 weeks ago, OpenAI deprecating Sora. So Sora was this incredible AI video generation, produced some pretty amazing videos. It was being used a little bit in Hollywood as well. The reason behind it was because they're changing their strategy and wanted to focus a lot more on where they saw they were going to make revenue and profit. So yeah, what did you think of that, Rob?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And I think it's particularly interesting because I think Disney had something like a $1 billion deal with OpenAI to use Sora for a lot of their kind of upcoming stuff like Marvel and all those kind of different things. And the other thing I heard about it is that because video and text and audio, all the different modals require quite different kind of skill sets, investments, all that kind of thing. And so video itself requires a lot of different skill sets to keep it maintained and getting better. But secondly, it's also incredibly expensive on the compute, as I understand it. And so one of the things that I think OpenAI and many AI companies are going to struggle with soon is just capacity of compute. So I think one of the things driving this might have been there's a lot of people messing around with video, generating a lot of compute, and we're going to need it soon. So I think there's probably a little bit of that in the background as well, Craig.
And interestingly, there's no news from Google, but obviously Google produced one of the other popular models for video generation. Is it still called
Yeah,
VO?
yeah, I think so.
So yeah, you'd wonder how Google are viewing things, because obviously if I can't use VO, then I'm gonna probably have to pay for something.
Yeah. Well, I think VO's still going, and I think if anything, I'm sure they produced a kind of VO Mini or VO Flash or VO. I can't remember what they
Right,
call
yeah,
them.
it is still going. It's just you wonder, are they going to start charging more for VO? Because I do use it, actually. I do use it. I'm not using it for anything professional, but I use it for bits and pieces. Yeah, I just wonder if they're going to have to change the model, given the fact that obviously they've all these companies have been giving away compute for free, and it's been expensive for them just to grow market share. But now things are starting to settle, and they're going to have to start thinking about profits. You wonder how the charging model is going to move. I know you have to, when you get to a certain amount of video footage, you do have to pay credits, but are the credits super cheap at the moment compared to what it might be in the future when there's a shortage?
Yeah, and I think people, from what I see and what I've been using, the limits on stuff like Claude Code in the pro plans or whatever are pushing people much more towards max plans and that kind of thing now, because for exactly that same reason, right? They're exiting more money than they're bringing in, and that's not the idea. Anthropic seems to have got a pretty good handle on that, whereas OpenAI, I'm not sure how, because they're much more consumer, much less business. Which probably leads us to our next one, Craig, about, for me, Mythos has been quite interesting this week, as in I think only 10 companies have got access to it right now, some of the big kind of tech companies, because Anthropic think that it's a little bit too dangerous to release. Some people said that about GPT-2 about 4 years ago, I think. So maybe it's hyperbole, but they seem really quite worried about it, to the extent where they've also produced, I think it's Project Glasswing, which is a kind of an initiative to try and ensure that the world's most important systems are kind of, secured against this kind of model that can find these vulnerabilities, because they believe it's found vulnerabilities in all the major operating systems and all the major browsers quite quickly. So, I mean, that's quite a shocking statement in some ways, because we run these things every day and we expect those things to be secure, right?
Yeah, so for those that don't know what Mythos is, it's actually appeared in kind of mainstream news, hasn't it, Aaron? I was reading it in The Economist this morning, and there's a big article on it there. I've seen it in The Guardian, The Telegraph, and even the kind of the tabloid type media. So it's kind of headlines, because the drama is, what does this mean for global security across the world, and how sophisticated the cyber attacks will be. But just to explain what Mythos is.
Yeah, so it's basically Claude's latest model. It's their latest coding model. So you think you've got kind of Opus and Sonnet and all these kind of things, and they released Opus 4.7 yesterday, I think, as well. We've had 4.6 for a while, and obviously OpenAI have Codex. Mythos is Anthropic's kind of next gen version that they're looking to release, but they don't want to release it because they think it's too good. coding. And as a result, because it's such an expert level of coder, it also is an expert level at finding problems inside code and finding vulnerabilities. And so it'll be interesting to see whether we ever see that. I'm sure we will, but for now, it's under wraps with the big tech companies, and they're working together to make sure that all their stuff is ready. Because one thing that Anthropic knows is that as soon as the model gets released, then people will use it for bad stuff as well as good stuff. That's the sad nature of everything, right? It's just a tool.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought it was quite interesting. I read about 2 or 3 months ago. I read an article about COBOL. So there are still systems across a number of different retailers that still rely on mainframes. I know, for example, Next, one of our biggest UK retailers, is very dependent on mainframe systems. I've seen their architecture. There's a number of other fairly major retailers using COBOL, but they're stuck because nobody wants to change the COBOL code or migrate to a new more modern cloud version of whatever system it might be, whether it's their finance system or their supply chain systems. Now, what I've learned is that Claude is so sophisticated that it's been able to Claude Code. Has been able to ease the migration off COBOL and mainframe, IBM AS400s onto a more modern architecture. And what I read was that's impacted the IBM share price when that was that was announced. So that's interesting because I just find it shocking that we've still got COBOL and mainframes running pivotal systems in retailers, but it works, right? But it's not particularly cheap to maintain and change.
No, but the cost of change is high, right? But my worry with a lot of those things is that normally it relies on one or two humans, single points of failure or a couple of points of failure. And if anything goes wrong, then that's a big threat for that particular company. And so anything that can ease their transition is probably a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Because I do see that AI is solving a lot of what I would call previously intractable problems. Do you know what I mean? They were just too expensive to fix or too whatever. And it's helping get those things done a lot quicker.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting development over the next year. How people approach those legacy systems, and how they can consider finally migrating them, because the cost barrier won't be there, and the risk, because some of those people that know the code base are probably not alive anymore. And then the next one I saw was I've not seen this. I've actually played with this. This is Claude Dispatch. So this was released in last month, and I think it's in response to a open source project called OpenClaw, which was grabbed the headlines about 2 months ago. And what OpenClaw was you could build an agentic system on your personal machine, your laptop or your desktop computer, and get it to do a whole bunch of tasks and have complete access to your computer. So it could download files and use remote browsers, connect to different third-party services. And it was all open source, but it was all very dangerous because people who didn't know what they were doing were using it and causing all sorts of carnage on their machine, and it was super risky. So Claude Cowork, which is an app you download from Anthropic onto your desktop, is a safer environment. It's a bit more managed. They've added to Claude Cowork. So Cowork is something that can do the same thing. It can use your local resources on your machine. Dispatch was something you could do in OpenClaw, which was the ability to use your mobile phone and access your machine when you're out and about and get it to do things. So, for example, list the contents of my downloads folder, grab that file, upload it to Google Drive for me, or whatever the task might be, or do some quite sophisticated actions. Download 15, do this research, produce an Excel sheet, upload the Excel sheet, produce a bunch of news articles from the Excel sheet, and upload those to WordPress. This is something I'm actually doing for my blog. Could do it all from Cowork. Now I can actually activate things and do them from remotely. So I can be at work in the office and then get Claude Dispatch to go off and do things while I'm not at my machine. So is this something you've played with, Rob, or something you've been following closely?
I've been following it because one of the things I considered really quickly when OpenClaw appeared was to get some isolated hardware so that I could have a little play with it, because I've listened to a few other podcasts about what people have done with it, and I was like, that is really interesting in terms of creating a genuine kind of sidekick, if you like, productivity sidekick that can do a lot of stuff for you when you're not there effectively. security risks are included, right? So, I mean, one of the Meta AI safety executives started playing with it and gave it access to all of their email, and gave them some kind of very fuzzy task like clear up my email or manage my email for me or something like that. And it started just deleting loads of her archive of her email because it thought it didn't need it anymore. And that person had to actually pull the power out to stop it because it wouldn't stop when it was asked to stop. So, I mean, there's definitely issues there. I haven't played with Claude Dispatch because certainly where I work, it's been immediately banned because it has access to the file system and it has, right? So you definitely can't use it on a work machine because it's still got quite a few risks associated with it if you don't know what you're doing. So I haven't played with it yet, but I'm quite excited about it. And I probably just need to invest in a little bit of hardware and do something isolated with it
Yeah,
because
yeah. I'm not doing it for my work account. This is
no,
definitely one
exactly. That's
my
what.
own Mac Studio and my own login. And then final one on general purpose technology. You read an article about cognitive load. Interesting article. Tell us more.
Yeah, it's worth checking out. If you, it's on a Substack that I can link to. We can link to in show notes or whatever we're going to do with this particular thing. But basically, what he was saying is that before AI came along, if you were a kind of a developer or technical person coding, then you'd have these breaks where you would do lower cognitive load tasks. Like you'd work intensely, maybe for a couple of hours, but maybe an hour, whatever it was. Then you do some email, do some time tracking, do some whatever. And so your brain got these breaks. It went up and down throughout the day. It's very easy now with AI, especially multi-agent work, that you set off 2 or 3 agents, and then by the time the first one is kind of you set off, sorry, by the time you set off the third one, the first one might have come back with some results. And so actually the amount of time you're spending in kind of high cognitive load has actually got higher. And so each day can be quite a bit more exhausting and you feel like you've got to keep up with the AI agents, right? I've also read that quite a bit. And that keeps people, and it can be, yeah, quite tiring by the end of the day. And I think some people will need to kind of really think about that in terms of their workflow. Yes, it can help you, get that much better, but what's the cost? Potentially mental cost that might be unsustainable. And this is also proven by research in this Substack. So I thought that was quite interesting because a lot of what we haven't spoke about so far, we spoke a lot about how it's making us better, more efficient, faster, higher quality, but what's the human effect? We haven't had a lot of research on that yet.
Yeah, and I always find that we've talked about this previously. I always find that there's certain hours of the day where you're hyper productive, and there's other hours where you've just got fatigue and you cannot process effectively. I think it's going to be very similar. You're just going to work out how, based on your own body and how your own body responds, how best to manage it. But yeah, we're talking about the era of hyper productivity, aren't we? And then now we just got to think about how does the human interact with this technology?
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, really interesting.
Okay, so we're going to go into just retail specific news that we've seen. So we'll just similar style. We'll go through some of the things we've been observing in the world of kind of digital and technology in retail. I'll start with just one observation. Well, this has been going on for a couple of years now, but it's having a real impact in retail. But this is about commerce inside social media. So you've probably seen the drive by TikTok. If you any trade show you go to now around e-commerce, TikTok are there selling to merchants. The idea of setting up TikTok shops, and that's now reached 23.4 billion in sales in the US this year. So it's about to hit that level in the US. That's just the US market. So that's significant in terms of the amount of influence TikTok shop is now having. Live commerce is the highest converting channel. I think there's no surprise there that if you're going to be watching a live commerce show, that you're probably a bit of a fan of whoever's producing that broadcast. So that's the highest converting. Interestingly, the affiliate model for creators has got a lot more sophisticated. So there's this kind of a much more sophisticated attribution model built into the infrastructure now, which does definitely help around trying to understand the impact of people like influencers. And then you've got things like in-app checkouts in these social media channels. Obviously, I think we know this. The Gen Z and millennials over-index on this stuff. This is kind of where they spend their time. I know I've got 3 children. 2 of them are teenagers, and they spend a huge amount of time in these environments, and they are buying stuff from social media. Yeah, Rob, you live and breathe retail. You work with retailers every day in this space. So anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. One of the things I've heard via kind of personal anecdotes and also through kind of articles and podcasts with the TikTok shops is just how, or TikTok's general platform is just how accurate and relevant the recommendations are to the users, because the users are on there quite a lot, and there's a large feedback loop, right, of what you like and what you don't like on TikTok. It is honed the algorithm to such a point where there are certain people who say almost everything that is suggested to them as a product to buy is something that they're like, that is interesting. You know what I mean? So compared to a lot of other kind of shopping platforms, which I still think are maybe a touch stupid at times, in terms of product recommendations, I think TikTok's got that sorted out. And I think that explains a lot of the kind of high conversion and also a lot of the engagement, not just on the live shopping, but just the simple product suggestions that are on there. I think they really crack that algorithm. And I think there's probably a lot to learn there about how they suggest it. But I think a lot of that is because of the just constant stream of data of what people like and don't like, right? Because they're viewing so much content so quickly, about across a wide variety of stuff. I think they've got an incredible base to make those recommendations from. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me that just keeps rising and rising. And if you add an AI layer on top of that, obviously they're using AI to do the recommendations, but if you add, a bit more Gen AI on top of that and that kind of thing, and the video generation that will obviously fuel a lot of TikToks in the future, I think that could get even more powerful. I mean, and we're seeing these platforms are really strong. And obviously, if you go over to, eastern side of the world, and if you look at the Chinas and this kind of stuff, they've got this on steroids, right? On their own platforms. So I think that's, yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, and you've seen just if we switch to agentic shopping, which is another kind of huge kind of growth area and something that's not impacting retailers hugely yet, but it's starting to make real inroads, which is agentic shopping.
Mm.
Rufus, you've observation on Rufus this month.
Yeah, I just it's something I'm keeping track of generally, because I think one of the things that Amazon has is it has scale, right? So whenever Amazon does something, it's really interesting to see what the scale effects are, on that particular thing. And I think any company that has scale is interesting. I mean, one of the things we saw in the past week or so, was IKEA introduced a kind of customer service agent. And it was so effective at dealing with customer queries, that they had 3,500 people. They could no longer keep busy with customer service. Right? And so what they did was very interesting, is they retrained them to be interior designers, and started a new paid for service where you had interior design help for something like €25 or something like that. I can't remember how much, but that's become a 1.4 billion revenue stream for them all of a sudden. So that's quite interesting. But talking about scale, but then Rufus, same kind of thing again, that they've introduced it and it's become really quite effective. They reckon it'll add 10 billion of incremental revenue. Now, Amazon is obviously a massive business, so 10 billion to them is not as much as it is to others, but it's still a significant amount of money. The number of people they have interacting with it has really gone up. That user adoption is like 140% year over year. And these are all stats that you can choose to believe or not, because there's no proof, with Amazon and Rufus, obviously. But it's come to me anecdotally. Even my wife, Verity, she recently did a return on Amazon. She was like, "Oh, returns have got so much easier on Amazon." And so I looked into it, and it's because she's interacting with Rufus to do the return instead of the old kind of click, click, click model. So it's reached directly to me. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there. But again, Amazon has the scale and the data, so it's quite a curious thing. Something to watch for sure.
The next article that I saw was this was yesterday actually. So this was M&S launched their new Spark scheme. So this was all about delivering much more personalized rewards and more money based. I've been a big user of Sparks because we have a local food hall. I always pop the app up when I go into store to see what offers. And yeah, they're not hyper relevant to me, but I at least might buy into a category that I don't normally buy into. But the relaunch has been they announced yesterday the relaunch on their kind of PR site, and a lot of the newspapers got hold of this, and it's much more money based rewards rather than kind of points, which is feedback from their customers. But yeah, the personalization angle was quite interesting. So the idea that the personalization would be much more real time, much more. Technology has enabled this because we've talked about personalization, haven't we? I mean, you and I have known each other for best part of like 15, 16 years. And in e-commerce in particular, we've talked about real-time personalization for a very, very long time, one-to-one personalization. But the technology's been the limiter. And whilst there's all these promises in this dream, the technology's been the limiter. So this heralds a kind of new era potentially of loyalty. Yeah, you've worked with retailers on loyalty before. So what are you seeing in terms of how retailers are viewing the changes in how technology is changing how you can deliver a better loyalty?
Yeah, I think loyalty's just flat out got a lot more popular recently because a lot of people have realised, or a lot of brands have realised, that that's a route to get quite a lot of data together about a customer. And I think, if we walk back in the UK, Tesco kind of led the way with this with Clubcard. So they had vast amounts of customers coming to their stores and buying things, but they had no way to aggregate that data by customer, right? So Clubcard enabled that. And I think finally, quite a lot of retailers have cottoned on that that this is a good idea, right? That if you want to build loyalty and you want to reward customers, you do need to know what they're doing, especially if they're regular purchasers. And so that's really gone a long way. But I think the feedback I've seen on Sparks is really positive. Lots of customers have commented and said, "Oh, this is how it should have been," or "I'm really happy that this has happened," or it's received unanimous kind of praise from what I've seen, which is quite good. And I went into a kind of M&S convenience store yesterday while in London, and they were actively trying to recruit new Sparks members as well, and said, "We've changed our loyalty scheme. Here's they had a little card pack, and they were trying to get more people into the scheme." So I think that's a good thing, and I think it'll do well for them, and I think it's done well for a lot of people. The other big change I've seen in loyalty is people have made loyalty schemes a bit more specific to the type of brand they are. So, for instance, we've done a fair bit of work with Harvey Nichols over time, and they redid their loyalty scheme a year or so ago, maybe a bit more, to make it more focused on who they were as a brand. So it was more about exclusive access to events or exclusive access to particular opening times, or you know what I mean. It was all about exclusivity and being behind the curtain or behind the door, if you like, as opposed to money off, because your standard Harvey Nichols customer is not really that motivated by a few pounds off of a garment, right? And I think that's a really good idea. So before anyone starts anything, they shouldn't assume it has to be money off or it has to be points related. Sometimes it can be an invisible loyalty scheme where just perks are granted through activity. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and the big retailers, like, I mean, the ones that have lots of categories, it's a good way to get people to buy into new categories. So like a grocer, or your Marks and Spencer, your Harvey Nicks, giving customers missions, and they shop these new missions, so they broaden their the range of products that they would normally buy.
Mm.
I've got another one here, which is actually, it's not actually technically not retail. It's soccer. This is Inter Miami.
Uh-huh.
So they are using the same type of technology that we've been using in Amazon stores. So if you've been in London, there's been a lot of these trial Amazon just walk out stores. We had one at the end of my road, actually, an Amazon store. You would walk in, pick up groceries, and then just walk out, and it would all you have to do is identify yourself with your mobile app, and that would be it. You didn't have to manage the transaction. It was I found the experience really good and
Mm-hmm.
convenient. That's been rolled out in stadiums now in the US. So it started with Inter Miami, which is I think where Lionel Messi plays now, if I've got that right. But yeah, check out free stadium, grab and walk out, just similar to the Amazon concept. So that's not dead. They closed a bunch of those stores in London because it was just the cost of the technology and the labor to set things up, and because it relied on things like scales as well as cameras in the roof. There were millions of cameras in the roof, but also scales on the shelves. It was quite complicated to operate.
Yeah.
So whilst they rolled out quite a few of these across the US and the UK, it just found the cost to do it became too high. But maybe we're going to start, as this technology matures and AI perhaps plays a part in this, that we might find it's actually easier to roll this stuff out without the dependency on all this hardware.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, well, yes, it is the answer to that. The other thing we've got to think about with a stadium is that they don't need to scale beyond their stadium, right? So once they've done the stadium is done. They don't need to roll it out across 500 stores or
Yeah.
whatever, which makes it quite easy. If we link it back to our previous loyalty point, the point of Amazon is to get into that store, you had to show your account, right? So that they knew who you were related to. Because there were barriers on the front of the stores, right? You had to kind of scan your app to get in, I think, or something like that.
That's right. Yes.
And so if Into Miami is operating the same way, you also force account creation, which is a good idea because then you know what they're buying and you know how often they're there and all of those kind of different things. So you've got that kind of double whammy of data going on. And I suppose the third layer to it, when I was thinking about it as you were saying it, is that stadiums want high throughput at particular times, right? Just before the game starts, half time, all that kind of thing. They were reliant on humans a lot of the time to do that, to process it through the till and all that kind of thing. If you can walk in, grab something, walk out, and that takes all of 30 seconds, all of a sudden you've got this massive queue busting effect and more people will go and get stuff as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really interesting concept. I'm sure it'll roll out fast in lots of places.
It's interesting you say that. So when you're at half time, I go to a lot of Premier League football, or not just Premier League, whatever division. Yeah, there's still people queuing at half time when the match restarts,
Exactly.
um, because they've not got their beer. So yeah, I can see that making a big difference. Yeah, you've seen something around Salesforce, Shopify releasing some toolkits.
Yeah, yeah. So it's quite interesting this. So, but both Salesforce and now Shopify have done it. It's effectively wrapping. It's providing command line tools that the AI can use, right? So whether that's wrapped in MCP or just using the CLI tool, it's giving people access to all the APIs, but you can use Claude to do it, or you can use OpenAI to do it, or whatever. Which means if you couple that with some of the stuff that you were talking about earlier, like Claude Dispatch, for instance, you could have something that runs every day that extracts all of your kind of products catalogs and finds all the products that don't have, the right kind of descriptions or descriptions that are high enough quality, or you could update them, or you know what I mean? You can all of a sudden you can use all of AI's skill set to apply it to your merchandising online. Because of what these kind of command line interfaces are opening up to AI. So I just think that unlocks a lot of possibilities across platforms to suddenly automate a set of workflows. Because if I know nothing else about retail and e-commerce, one of the things that has forever plagued these kind of teams is just the amount of manual work that it requires to get a product online, or to
Yeah,
make sure it's updated, or ensure quality across the platform, or whatever, right? It always required just human power, and not so much anymore with these tools. So I think that's really exciting.
yeah, and it's always. I mean, retail's obsessive. It's such an operationally intense. Out of any industry, it's probably one of the most operationally intense industries. So productivity, even small percentage point increases in improvement when you put them at scale, make a massive difference. So yeah, I
Absolutely.
agree. I agree with you there. This could be, might seem like a minor news story, but actually could be quite significant
Yep.
in going forward. We have to talk about robots because we're talking about technology and retail, so we've got to talk about robots. This is, I remember talking about robots in stores, and I've got stuff I posted to the Retail Innovation website when it first started 12, 13 years ago about robots and packing shelves, but it was all concepts. It never really rolled out beyond like one or two stores. But I'm now starting to see these inventory robots that do shelf auditing as well as I got in this example. This is Tally stores, 244 stores, and they're doing these robots are going around and auditing the shelves, which is a task that a very mundane task that colleagues have to do every day as part of their kind of routine tasks. The fact that they've rolled it out to 244 stores suggests that this technology is now ready to kind of hit a big time in all different sizes and shapes of retailers. I think that's interesting. When I listen to Elon Musk about robotics, I kind of Elon always gets it wrong. He always says in 3 years it'll be like this, and you're like, actually, it probably ends up being maybe 5 or 6 years. But he's normally right that he sees an opportunity. He's talking about robots being pretty versatile in the future and pretty cheap. He's talking about 30. How do you see robotics in retail? I mean, are we talking about stores and warehousing and inventory, high volume operational tasks?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we know from a lot of the kind of stories that come out of Amazon, or places like THG in the UK or whatever, the sophistication of their warehouses is already getting pretty high, and there's a lot of automation and robotics in there. So the idea that would extend to kind of stores where you need the latest in AI to navigate that environment, it's a little bit trickier, right, than a really set path warehouse where everything's marked out. I can see how that would make a big difference. And this is linked back to the previous story, isn't it? It's again, how can retail become leaner effectively, be more accurate as well in its data. And so I think that's important. And then the final thing, I read an article earlier in the week about where the money's going. So where is private equity money going, VC money going, all of that kind of stuff. It's not really going towards software anymore, right? Software and software as a service, because there's collapsed the cost of creating software now. They don't see that there's enough of a moat within most software companies that make it worth investing significant sums into these entities. So yes, there's still a lot of money going into OpenAI, Anthropic, all of those kind of things, the frontier guys. But your average software startup is not really getting funded anymore. What is getting funded is hardware, is robotics, because they're the things where substantial moat can be created. Because as much as we've seen some fantastic examples of robots, we've also seen the robots that are going crazy, right? There's plenty of videos on YouTube about the robots that have lost their mind and have started like hitting things and falling over and all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely a moat to be built there. I think that's quite interesting how that will develop.
Yeah, and I'm also seeing so Waymo in London. Every day now, I cycle in and out of London all the time. I see Waymos everywhere now. They're only they haven't been launched. It's just test driving. Waymo, obviously, what that heralds is the era of self-driving, and this is I'm specifically thinking about delivery. So your grocery delivery, which is always a person that comes to your house, which is actually a very pleasant experience because they're always very nice. The ones that come to my house, and you have a bit of a chat. But this is probably going to there's going to be a lot more autonomous delivery happening for sure as a result of this kind of machinery being operated by AI. The final one I had news story I had was just on holograms. In M&S, when we first started working with each other, you were a supplier. 2010, I used to have this toy room in Paddington, it was called Craig's Toy Room. I was collecting various different bits of hardware and everything from kind of big touchscreen displays to holograms. And this one's actually a hologram. Holograms it was all very gimmicky. You had a hologram that just would talk to people. You'd see them at EasyJet talking to people in the queue and stuff, just telling you how to pack your bag, and it's probably quite effective there. But this hologram is interactive, obviously, with AI. You can talk to the hologram in this store. So this is Skechers, and they put a hologram in the store, and it has a real-time conversation. It lets you take selfies with you, but also allows you to interact with your phone and unlock promotions. So I thought that was quite a good combination. Maybe we will actually see holograms and it won't just be in my toy room in Paddington anymore.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've always liked about effective kind of holograms is that they don't take up, or they look like they don't take up as much physical space as like a big screen installation to do the same thing, right? And they're a bit see-through, and so they kind of open up the store instead of having a lot of kind of clutter inside the store. It's an important thing to think about. It is slightly weird to me that 20, 30 years ago, every sci-fi movie you'd watch would have some kind of hologram talking to someone, right? And now genuinely we're probably there, or not that far off. But yeah, it's quite I mean, the concept that you just said though of a two-way conversation, I'm seeing everywhere. The idea that email, for so long we've had no reply email addresses, right? You couldn't reply to them because we can't handle the volume or whatever. Now with AI, every email can be replied to effectively and can be routed to the right place potentially. So I think we'll see the death of the no reply email address. Maybe not from governments or councils, but certainly from retailers. I reckon that'll change. So yeah, exciting stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on that topic, it's it's something I talk to retailers almost every week about, which is if you remove the constraint of humans, then how does your business look? So if you remember, like in the old days when there was no internet, you'd go into a store and you'd have a conversation with the colleague in the store, and that's how you'd sell the product. You'd see it on the shelves and you'd talk to someone on the shop floor. Now what's happened is they've removed a lot because of all the pressure on margin. They've removed people from the shop floor, and in a lot of stores, and the only place you can find colleagues is actually stacking shelves or behind the tills, operating the tills. Mm-hmm. So now I think with conversation, when a retailer reaches out to you and tells you about a new promotion, you can reply and have a conversation because it doesn't have to be fielded by a human, which would really erode margin. Now it's now an AI agent.
Exactly that. Yeah, so really good.
So our final topic then is just we're going to talk about agentic shopping and UCP and ACP. For those that don't know, these are two protocols launched by both Google and OpenAI. The idea is that you as a customer can go in and have a conversation with a language model, whether it be Gemini or ChatGPT, and ask it questions about products, and it will have a visibility of a wide array of merchants. So you could then get advice and then purchase a product actually inside the checkout. And that was announced by OpenAI initially. Then Google introduced their UCP protocol 3 to 6 months later. I can't remember the exact timeline, but a much broader protocol that kind of recognized the merchants want to have control of the customer conversation. So this was a different angle on it, wasn't it? UCP and ACP, they both had different stances. And what was interesting is OpenAI have changed their focus with that strategy pivot that we talked about earlier with Sora. They've changed their focus and actually are not doubling down so much on their protocol, and they've had based on feedback from merchants. This is something I know, Rob. You talk to retailers almost weekly about as well.
Mm-hmm.
You've got some.
I
I know
do.
you get some really interesting insight and into how retailers view this and how retailers are responding to this.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, in many ways, it's got parallels to when digital first appeared. I think, in that a lot of people, if you would have asked 10 years ago who's worried about their web strategy or who's worried about their omni-channel strategy or whatever, then loads of people would have put their hands up. Whereas today, not so much, right? It's been mostly kind of, I wouldn't say solved, but less people are worried about it. But if you ask them about their AI strategy today, they certainly will put their hands up, right? That was clear from a customer yesterday, and I think these protocols are just emerging, just like some of the early kind of standards of the web. There will be winners and there will be losers. One of the things that, yes, ACP from OpenAI, it started faster, it started earlier, as you said, but they backed away from it now. But I think that's more about them than it is about commerce protocols as a whole. The idea that you will want a protocol so an agent can buy on your behalf with certain guardrails is obvious to me. It is just obvious. There is no way that this won't happen and won't be popular. No matter what the kind of naysayers say about it, I'm really confident in this particular thing. I think it's just because OpenAI have got too many plates and they need to drop some, basically. That's why they backed off, because you've seen that Google has actually doubled. So yes, they released it at NRF, a retail show, and Sundar, the CEO of Google, went down there to announce it, which is unusual in itself, a tech leader going to a retail show. But since then, in January, they've updated it 3 or 4 times at least to add more and more sophistication. So you can do promotions inside it. You can give it loyalty kind of information. You found recently about you can do real-time product data, so live pricing can be used. And you can see how this will lead to kind of negotiated pricing, especially for kind of customers. And so what our customers are doing and thinking about is that they want to be prepared. So they're watching their AI traffic and they're seeing how it converts. My advice is that they treat it like its own channel, just like the web was a long time ago. Isolate it a bit, see whether it's converting, see whether the average order value is high, see whether it's affecting kind of customer experience, whether the return rate is higher, all of these kind of different metrics we need to understand about this new and emerging channel. And then the other thing they really got to do is make sure that their data is ready, right? So one of the things Google have always been quite good at is obviously Google Shopping for AdWords and all that kind of thing. They've extended Google Shopping recently, so you can put much more detail and context into it. So you've always been able to put reviews, but reviews are more important. Q&A sections are really important now within the product feed. So a lot of brands and retailers have suddenly realized they've got to produce probably 3 to 5x the content they were putting in feeds before now, so that agents can read and use that information. Because we built all of these systems for humans. And so actually we backed off the text. More and more product descriptions got smaller and smaller, right? Because we realized people didn't read them. They read the reviews maybe, but they looked at the pictures. Agents have flipped that on its head. They're much more about, let me read all this information and all the context. And that's how I'll do the recommendation. And I think that is I wouldn't say it's a complete pivot, but it's definitely a reorientation for retailers. Fortunately, we also have AI tools to enable us to write some of this stuff as well. So we've got part of the solution in the problem, if that makes sense. So I think there's there's a lot to do there. But my advice for retailers right now is just start getting that data up to scratch. Start meeting these protocols where they are in terms of feeding the right information. And then the final thing I'd advise before I kind of pause on this big tirade is making sure you understand who you are as a brand, because you might not be the kind of purchase that will go through an agentic protocol very often, right? So, for instance, if you're Louis Vuitton, then your kind of customers are expecting white glove service. They love the in-person shopping experience. You know, it's all about that experience and that curation and being treated as special, right? That's the whole point of the whole thing. So the idea that you're going to, you know, try and save £5, $5, whatever it is, by getting an agent to find you the cheapest Louis Vuitton bag, this doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense for that retailer. However, if you're a grocer, you should be paying a lot of attention, or a convenience retailer, you should be paying a lot of attention, because the idea that I talk into my agent, whatever that agent might be in the future, and say, we've just ran out of coffee, can you make sure some comes as soon as you can? And that's all I say. And it knows what my coffee is. It knows where the latest, you know what I mean? This is an obvious kind of use case. So yeah, lots going on there, Craig. Lots.
And certainly from the data that I've seen, I've looked at some of the data that's available. So there's sources that have got data around acquisition. I talk to retailers, obviously ask them what their acquisition is, and fashion retailers are saying, well, it's less than 0.8% often that's coming from language models. That's the kind of current benchmark I've got. But then I look at specialty, so things like electronics and specialty categories, where it's actually a very considered purchase, and the traffic's a lot higher, because let's face it, if I'm buying a TV, I don't buy a TV that often, maybe once every 7 to 8 years. I don't really know what the latest is. All I know is what my requirements are. So that changes. And also the industry I've come from our family business, cycling, that's a very long consultation when you have with a customer when they're spending a couple of £1,000 or £5,000 on a bicycle, based on their requirements. So that's a conversation that you used to have in the store that was lengthy. You couldn't reproduce online. So I see a lot of those specialty categories already delivering a lot of acquisition traffic through them. So specialty as well really needs to take this quite seriously. So if you're a Halfords or your Currys, this is something that's super critical.
Yeah, I think so. And I've seen a few different kind of bits of, I hesitate to say research, but kind of reporting. Some of it says, oh, the conversion rate of agentic traffic is actually really poor compared to normal. And then I've seen other reports that said, yes, it was really poor a year ago, but actually it's changed a lot, and the conversion is higher than standard channels now. So I think, you know, you've got to understand your own data, Craig, haven't you, at the end of the day, if you're a retailer.
Nothing changes that.
But definitely not underestimate what's happening, because sometimes your data will be affected by how well you're actually showing up, right? If you're not providing all of this context data, or all the review data, question and answer data to these generative engines, well, you're probably not showing up, but you don't realize you're not showing up. So I think there's this whole industry that's growing around what's called AEO or GEO, which are slightly different things, but let's leave that there for now. Your agent visibility basically is something that's going to be really important in the next few months.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rob, for that. And this is fast moving, so we'll keep people updated on how this evolves over the next 12 months too, and also talk about visual discovery with AI. So this is obviously, shopping is very visual, particularly fashion. So how is AI being used for visual discovery in the future? We'll cover that in a future episode. So, but with that, we've kind of reached the end of this episode, our first episode. So thank you for those that have joined us. Next time round, we will be joined by our third co-presenter, Ralph, in the next episode. He couldn't make this one today. We'll also have a special guest retailer. So the idea is, with these, we'll have the same format as we've had today, but also invite retailers to talk to us about how they're viewing AI and technology innovation in general, and how they're deploying it and what they see. So yeah, look forward to speaking to you next month, Rob, and carrying on the conversation in this very, very fast moving world of retail innovation.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob.